everyone, and welcome to Dr. Spotfire. Learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. And that's what we aim to do in this session. So we run this entire thing as Q&A, and you're able to post your questions on community, send them to us via Twitter or email, and then we pick up those questions and solve them. So our crew is me, I'm Divya Jyoti, or DJ, and I'm the data scientist on board. We've got Billy, who's leading our customer success team, and he's working with all the different people that we collaborate with. And then we've got Robert, who's new to our team, and he's going to be doing a lot of the post-processing. So if you see the nice little summaries on YouTube, that's him. And then we've got Anna, who's our firefighter and works to put the various different pieces together. Today's featured speaker is Ninad. He's going to be talking about setting up Kerberos authentication for Spotfire server. And we're all based out of Palo Alto, but we've got people coming in from all places of the world. All right, Ninad, it's over to you, and let's get started with our featured session for today.
Okay, thanks, DJ. Hey guys, this is Ninad, and today we're gonna do a live demo of how we will configure Kerberos authentication on Spotfire instance. Kerberos is one of the most secure authentication method you can do, but it's a little bit complicated since it involves domain controllers and your LDAP as well. So let's start with first step of creating service accounts required for Kerberos. To set up Kerberos, you need a service account. Those service accounts need to be configured with proper configurations on your domain controller. For example, they has to be clicked for password never expire, because if the password expires, it breaks whole Kerberos configuration, and you have to do everything again. And again, one more thing is the account is sensitive and cannot be delegated, should not be checked for the service account which you're gonna use for Kerberos. So the first step in configuring Kerberos is to set SPNs. For setting SPNs, there are commands. After the session, I'm going to post a wiki article on which you will find all those commands. So if I'm going too fast, it's okay. On wiki article, there is whole explanation of each of these commands. So set SPN -s, and then you put your whole SPN of server. So if you see, TSS Ker is the host name of our Spotfire server, and Ker Spot is the service account we are gonna use to configure Kerberos. Every time you configure Kerberos, you need two SPNs, one with short name and one with FQDN, which is fully qualified domain name. So our domain is called ease.local. It's a test domain I created. And you have to do same for node manager as well, because if you're going to use data sources who configured Kerberos, you need to run your node manager with service account who has SPNs, qualified SPNs on that. So after we are done here, let's see if SPNs are registered properly on that service account. So, and yeah, I am on domain controller where I'm registering these SPNs because you need to have a domain admin privileges to register any SPNs on your domain. And let's register SPNs for our node manager as well. So let's just make sure the host name is right. And yeah, current node is the service account we're going to use for node manager. It takes a little bit time because when you try to register SPN with -s as a variable, it will try to search for any duplicate SPN on your whole domain, and only then it will register. Cool. So let's go to next step where we need to create a file called keytab, which is a very vital file in Kerberos authentication. It's encrypted file which has information about which accounts we are using for Kerberos and how the SPN is tagged with that service account and everything. So let me copy that command and then I will explain. So that command also need to be run by domain admin privileges. Mostly, many of the domain admins run those commands on domain servers. So if you see the command is called ktpass, and what it's doing is saying that this is the SPN which we just registered, and it's mapping to the user on which we registered that SPN. And we are saying we're going to use RC4 Hammock as an encryption method for any of the Kerberos tickets which get generated. And the key tab name will be spotfire.keytab. So after running this command, that key tab get generated from where I ran it. So in C user folder. So if I go there, this is the key tab file which got generated because of the ktpass command. So what we need to do is we have to copy that key tab and go on Spotfire server where we installed it. And again, you don't, if I'm going fast, everything is in that wiki article which we will post. JRE lib, and we have to paste that keytab file in this folder. After that, next step is krbfi.conf. So let me open the original KRB5. So when you install the Spotfire server, by default KRB5 will be in this format where it just with default values, which you have to replace with your domain and your admin server, which is a KDC is mainly the domain controller server. So I already changed those. For example, our domain is a.local, as we already saw in ktpass. We used RC4 Hammock. You can use different encryption methods as well, which are already explained in admin manual. And our KDC, that is our domain controller name, is this one. And I already made changes in the KRB5 con to match my environment, this demo environment. So now next step is you need to verify that whatever changes you made in KRB5 and SPNs is able to create a ticket on your under your domain. So for that you need to run a command called knit. It's a tool which already comes inside our Spotfire installation directory, and the location is this one. So let me copy that command and explain what it means. So the knit.exe is the tool, which is a small tool inside this directory, which comes in installation. So what you are doing is you are telling knit tool, this is my key tab and this is my SPN. Can you create a ticket? So if it gives an error, that means something is not right. So I have to check what's going wrong. Okay, let me see.
Hi everyone, while Ninad is debugging what's happening, and that is going to be very typical of your Kerberos installation, I have sent you on the chat an article about setting up the various steps involved. So it's basically a text version of the same kind of walkthrough that you're seeing.
Yeah.
Ninad, what do you think is very useful for the users to be able to debug things like this? Because this is very typical of, Kerberos behavior. So what do you think can be the top 3 to 5 reasons of this?
So it's very difficult. What might have happened is to create this demo, I did a test run with different service accounts and the SPNs. That might have created this issue because I created SPNs linked to some different service accounts. And for demo, I am using different service accounts. What that error means is whatever key tab you created, I don't able to find the SPN you are looking for. And that's why it's giving that error. Basically, what I can do is I can go ahead and explain all the steps, and then I can actually show working environment of Kerberos, how it will work. Still, we can go ahead and I can explain all the steps required to configure the Kerberos.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in ideal world, this has to work, saying new ticket has been created. But this is a reality when you configure Kerberos. Many times you come across this kind of issues because there is a huge dependency on different variables like domain controller, how it is set up, and everything. So next step would be to enable delegation on the service accounts you're using. For example, we use this service account. So you go here and enable delegation. So here also one thing, it depends on what type of delegation you want to go with. There are two types called unconstrained and constrained. So when I click second option, what I'm doing is I'm going for unconstrained delegation, but sometimes companies opt for more secure way in Kerberos, where they go with constrained delegation, which is this one, and add specific services or the server which they only want to delegate. For this demo, let's go with unconstrained delegation. Now, last step is to configure Kerberos inside Spotfire. So what I did already is I configured basic LDAP, which is my demo domain controller, and it's just a basic LDAP configuration. So what you do is you select authentication as Kerberos, and user directory you can do LDAP or database, but according to me database will not make sense if you're going for Kerberos, which is we are going for Kerberos because you want to be more secure. So user directory, 99% its user directory is LDAP. So in Kerberos, if you see, if we have to specify service principal name here, and that you can have it from here. If you see, we use same format of service principal name while creating KeyTab file. So you can just copy that. And that browse to the KeyTab file we copied, which is this one. And yeah, I will advise to always enable extra debug logging because of Kerberos nature, and you need help when troubleshooting. So let's save the configuration. And as with Spotfire, every time you make any changes to configuration, you need to restart the Spotfire server service. So if you saw, we don't need to run service with that service account. You can run it as local service, but for node manager, you need to run service account with service account. The node manager service you need to run as service account. The service account you use to register SPNs on node manager host name. Then let's stop this, and you need to add that service account into the administrator group on node manager server. Restarting. In perfect world, it should work, but our keynet failed, so I doubt. For Kerberos, there is requirements when you try to access a Spotfire server URL, which is Kerberos configured. I am taking an example of but there is different setting you need to do on Chrome and Firefox, which is listed in our admin guide. So in what you need to do is you have to go in local intranet and add the URL you're going to use of Spotfire server, which I already added here. And in advanced setting, you have to make sure that Windows integrated authentication is enabled, means it's clicked. This one, and when you put here that it works, yeah, in this case it's failing, but it works. So let me show you my other environment.
So Ninad, what would you say is the best place for users to report on issues like this? Like, should they post it on community? Should they post it with support? Like, what should be, where do they start?
Especially for Kerberos, I will highly advise to create a support ticket. And when you create a support ticket, make sure your logging level is in debug mode, and you recreate the issue and then create a ticket with all the debug logs from your server and node manager. So support engineer will have a clear picture what's going on. And always run that knet command, and if it's failing, even paste the output of that knet command. So this one is my different environment. If you see, as soon as I put the URL of my Spotfire server, the login page comes up. You don't need to log in manually, and so if even for web player, it will work. So let me show how it sees when you try to log in using Spotfire Analyst to Kerberos Spotfire server. So this one is my different environment. So if you see, it will automatically take your Windows integrated authentication from the server you logged in, and it will log you inside the Spotfire environment. Let me send the wiki article I was referring to. So DJ, can I paste that in a chat, or I have to?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I am pasting the wiki article I was referring. And I will also paste the short video I created about configuring Spotfire, configuring Kerberos on Spotfire, so you guys have a better idea. Unfortunately, the live demo failed, but okay, I pasted both links for your references. That's all.
That's very
from
useful,
me.
Ninad. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone. Now we jump into Ninad. That was absolutely great. I'm already getting a couple of comments around questions around it, so we can take it up in more detail at the end of the session through email, community, or support. Let's jump into the Q&A session for the week. So the first thing is, how do you actually get your questions answered on Dr. Spotfire? So there's 3 ways you can tweet your questions at us directly if there's a simple how-tos. You can post it on community.tibco.com/answers, and Anna has sent you the link on chat for that. And then if you tag it with Dr. Spotfire, you mentioned Dr. Spotfire in the session, and if it's still unanswered, we pick up the unanswered questions. But otherwise, we have a large, diverse set of experts who answer the question much quicker than our sessions. The final way is that you can send us your questions by email. But the email protocol is that you should have some sensitive data or attachment within it. If it doesn't have that, then you should just paste it on community, and that way people will be able to get to it a lot faster, and a lot more people will be able to benefit from it. So last time we had an absolute smashing session on Iron Python rotating world DXP JSVs, where Andrew Berridge was able to create an orthographic globe view. And if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend that you go to our YouTube playlist and check it out. Because of that, we didn't cover a couple of questions from that session, so I'm going to pick them up today. The first question that I received is about calculating net working hours between two date stamps. I picked it up from community and the solution is posted there, but I also wanted to walk through the solution a little bit in front of you to give you a sense of intuition about how to go about it. So the requirement is that there needs to be a calculated column which calculates the number of working hours between two date time stamps. So if you have 19/12/2017 at 1600 hours and 20/12/2017 at 0900 hours, we say that the working hours are between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and calculate the working hours to be 3. It should also exclude the weekend. Now, this is a classic example of a question where you're not directly going to find the answer because there's not one neat and tidy function that does it. Instead, I have shown the algorithm that you can use and how do you go about constructing that algorithm. So the first place to start is the TIBCO docs. So you can find all documentation at docs.tibco.com. And so let's actually go and check it out. And then once you sign in, you pick up your product or you type it here. You get the various options and all the documentation that's available. So I searched for TIBCO Spotfire and then I went and looked for date time functions. Now within date time, you can see that, by the way, all of these are compatible with your database date time variable types. If you've got SQL and that's giving out, a date time variable or just a date variable, then depending on the function, you'll be able to use it directly. So there's datetime now, which is the Python equivalent of sys.timeNow, or the R equivalent of, time. And then you've got day of the year. You're able to calculate the days between time spans. You're actually able to calculate the time span using date diff. So I went through that page, and using that, I've been able to come up with an algorithm. So the first thing that we do is that we assume the order. So let's say that date 1 is older than date 2. So I need to now find, how many weeks are there between date 1 and date 2. So let's get K1 and K2. And then if you subtract it and minus 1, you get the weekends between them. So you're directly able to subtract, number of days for each weekend. So now you've got just the pure days. So if you get the date diff and you find the total number of days between that and you subtract the weekend, you've got total working days. Now from working days, you want to calculate working hours. So our problem is made easier by the user specifying just these hours. Now, depending if you're working with different time zones, or if your date 1 and date 2 is not within the same year, so you can't directly subtract K1 and K2 if they're in different years. But this gives you an intuition of how to go about it. So if they were different years, you would first do year 1 and get Y1 and do year 2 and get Y2. And then for every year in between, you would add 52 weeks. So apart from minor modifications like that, you're essentially able to construct the entire algorithm purely using datetime functions. There's just no scripting happening. So it's very useful to go through the docs. So I was at this working hours place where I check whether the hour of date 1 is greater than 8 and less than 18. If yes, then hour 1 is simply the hour minus 8, otherwise 0. And similarly for date 2. And finally, total working hours is working hours from step 9, which is just 8 working hours for all the days in between date 1 and date 2. And then for the actual date 1 and date 2, you calculate it on this step. So this has been posted on the actual question page, but the video will also be available on our YouTube playlist if you want to go through the walkthrough again. Moving on to our second question. This is something that we see quite often. So this has to do with convert multiple column values. The user has a large data set that has multiple columns with pounds and multiple columns with cubic foot values. Now the user wants to convert them to kilo and cubic meter because metric is the smart way to go. And now the user is asking what's the best way to do it. So let's start at the beginning for this. Within Spotfire, if I open the data panel, so I already had it open, but let me open that up for you again. So in the data panel, I can look at each column and I can see, what the data type is. And I can manually change the data type here. Now, on top of that, I can do insert transformations. And then, so this is the first way. So we're going to discuss 3 different ways. And then this is the first way where you can do calculate and replace transformation. When you go to adding it, you have an option of selecting your columns. And once you select them, so let's say, I have electronics, and let me convert electronics right now. It's in USD. Let me convert it into Indian rupee. So let's say it's about 69. I haven't really checked. And then let's post that as electronics_INR. That's going to be my display name. So you can see that my type remains unchanged because my original type was currency, US dollars. So even when I multiply it, the type is still currency, but I might have to change the formatting. If I go in and click OK on it, there's no error, nothing. Now, if I skip this, you see immediately I get an error icon saying that it does not recognize the expression that I entered. So let me go in and click Enter. And then I can do that for multiple columns. And if I say, OK, now I'll see a new column with electronics as this. So something went wrong, didn't quite get, I think the as was supposed to be in capitals. So let me rename it. And I'm just working through the data panel. It's really quick and really easy to modify things. So you can see that now I have the scaled version, but I still have to deal with the formatting. So I can change the formatting by going to column properties, I think. And then within formatting, I can specify what the currency is. So that's the first way. But if you do that, you're going to have to do it again and again for multiple columns. So there's another way, which is we go in and put in an expression function. So an expression function is a variant of a data function. But with expression functions, you don't have to tie it to inputs and outputs. So for example, if I wrote a data function in R using my data functions tab, I would have to edit parameters and define the parameters from the table properties that go into the data function. The expression functions allow you a lot more flexibility. So you're able to skip over that step. So let's go in and create one. So let's call it currency convert, and I'm going to define it as my output is input multiplied by 69. And instead of this actual figure, I could have given it a document property as well. So if I am using document properties, then it would have been input 1 into input 2, something like that. But right now, let's just take the standard number. So once I have saved it, that's it. That's all I need to do. And now if I do tools, actually insert calculated column. For the calculated column, I'll see my currency convert, the function that I just created, show up over here. Now, you can see that the description is blank. That's because I didn't put in anything in the description when I was creating this expression function. So let's go in, edit it, put in a description as call this with the syntax. Call name, new column name, takes in currency convert of old column name. So this is the R assignment. I could have defined it using as syntax also. So now if I go in to insert calculated column, you'll see that it shows up. And now on my currency convert, I'm just able to insert that and insert electronic and repeat the process. So insert this. Yeah, actually I can't repeat the process in this window. So here's going to be a new column, and then I can give it a column name. Now, the two ways that we discussed, there's an advantage of the first one, which is that your transformation stays linked to your data. So even if you have a table or your data is completely inside your database, the transformations still work, and it works very optimally for in-database as well. There's an advantage of expression functions in the way that you saw that I don't need to give it input and output. So once I define my function, I can use it absolutely anywhere. In fact, not just on my insert column, but I can use it over here as well. So let's go ahead and do a custom expression. And on this, let's use my currency convert. So this is not correct because I'm actually passing it the row number, but you get the idea, right? So I'm not just creating columns, I'm not creating anything extra or replicating the data. I am simply creating this aggregation. I'm using it to aggregate my Y value. So that's also a really good feature with expression functions. But now, at the end of the day, you want to be able to do it with 10 columns at the same time. So I would suggest just creating a data function, and then you can select your columns and apply the transformation to them in batch. There's already on the ideas portal, a lot of people have asked for this batch transformation as a product enhancement, and it's under consideration. If you're not aware of the ideas portal, I recommend that you check it out. It's ideas.tipco.com. I'll have to sign in with my TIPCO email address, and then so I'm going to skip that step. But once you get in here, you're going to be able to see the various ideas that different people have posted. You can post your own idea, and as people vote up the ideas that the community thinks will be useful, the product management considers them for enhancements, and a lot of product enhancements have come from the ideas portal. So I definitely recommend that you check it out. So those were the 3 different ways if you do need help with the script for data functions, post it on community.tipco.com, and one of the team will be able to reach out with either a tear script or an IronPython script with which you're able to do that. The next question is related to our expression function idea, and so I wanted to address that. Basically, this user has a large financial complex data table. They've tried to calculate net present value on that. It's not a very complex calculation. It's happening directly using an R library. But the result is empty, and we have to go in and debug why that happened. So let me show you what's happening. Now here you can see that the present value and that is calculated, it's completely empty. But you can also see that it's being calculated on this data, and this data actually doesn't have values beyond this. So the function really doesn't know what to do. Why this is happening is because the NPV is registered as a data function. But if you go back to the original question, the question was about a cross table. So here's where we start to discuss when should you use a data function and when should you not. So on this page, you can see that the user has created a very clean view of all the data in a cross table. But when you're passing that to your data function, you're not passing it based on your cross table. You're actually passing it based on your original data table. And the original data table has blank values. So that's never going to work. In this situation, I recommend using expression functions because, as we saw, expression functions don't have to be tied to your input. They can take inputs from visualization, and cross table is a type of visualization. So that's the sort of intuition that we apply to get in situations like this. So if I go in here and show you, I've already registered NPV_exp expression function. It uses the same 2 lines of syntax. So you can see that the first line is actually my library call. And this is something really powerful. You know, your expression function doesn't really have to be a 1-line expression. It can be a script as long as you follow the convention of making sure that all the outputs, there's one output and it's named output. And there can be multiple inputs and they are named input 1, input 2, up to input n. As long as you follow that convention, you're able to write whatever script you want within these expression functions. So here's an example where I've done that. Now here you can see that this is a column function. I can also give it as an aggregation function. When you would give it as an aggregation function is, say, for example, you've got a scatter plot setup where on the y-axis you're using 3 different columns and all of those columns are being aggregated by averages. So in that case, if you use a column function, your plot is going to be confused and it will not know which aggregation to put into it. So still, for now, I've used a simple convention and used the column function. Let me go in and cancel that and show you the expression over here. So this is right-click, custom expressions. And I can see that, you know, this is something that's already been configured. The only thing, and if I search over here by NPV_exp, you can see that my expression function shows up. And let me show you the last line. So the last line is, let's write it from scratch because I think that'll be easier than figuring this out. NPV expression, let's insert it. Now we have to provide it the input. So from the data function, I can see that the first input is the discount rate. And now if I just insert the property, it will insert it as text. And that's not going to work. That's just going to be a string and it'll go wrong. So I have to insert it as value. Once I right click and insert it as value, my second is going to be the column of values that I was passing to it. And I looked it up from my parameters of the data function, and turns out that it's Dato. So let's click on OK. And something went wrong. So this is please specify an aggregation method. So because we created it as a column function, the cross table doesn't really know how to aggregate it unless we explicitly specify it. So I can either go in and change my expression function, but I want my expression function to remain more reusable. So instead of doing that, I am simply going to insert an average before my expression so that whatever result I get, I just average it out. And that follows the convention of, the rest of the columns here as well. So let's give it a name as NPV _ EXP. And when I click on OK, this says that it's okay. Yep, so average and NPV EXP, I insert that document property with the column and as NPV _ EXP, and things work as expected. I made a typo in there where I accidentally deleted one of the parentheses. So here you can see that we're getting some value for it. I don't completely understand the dashboard, so I don't know if this is the correct value, but now it's no longer blank. And over here, as just in conclusion, when you've created a view in a table, in a visualization table, so it can be a graphical table, summary table, cross table, a visualization, you can't run a data function on it. A data function will always run on the data table that you provide to it. An alternative way of solving this would be if I did this. So if I did export and visualization to PDF and then extracted the table, or if I did export from here and then I did data to file, and then I used this visualization to get that table, and then I brought that table back so that now it's no longer a linked view, it's actually an embedded table on which my data function can run. So that was all about expression functions and data functions, and hopefully that's made it a little bit clear around the differences between the two. The next question that I'll look at is line connection in a scatter plot. So thank you for the compliments. We're very happy that the work that our team is doing is helping out you guys, and you're getting more excited about Spotfire. So the problem here is that the user is working with scatter plots. The user was nice enough to send us the data. Remember, even if you describe your question really, really well, but you don't send us your data, sometimes we're not really able to solve the question effectively. So I really appreciate the fact that we got some dummy data along with the question. So now let's create the scatterplot view that the user wants. So on my, let's choose the correct table. And then on my x-axis, I have my variable name. I'm going to remove the color by and make it a bit nicer. Let's go into the properties and y-axis and make sure that I show the labels vertically so that you're actually able to, oops, not my y-axis, x-axis. Now I'll show my labels vertically so you can actually see some of the names. And on my y-axis, I'm going to add the other variable as well. So it's these two. Now you can see that it automatically colors by column names. Now, while we are at properties, let's go into line connection and draw a separate line per value in, I could use the ID column, I could use the row number. I'm going to use the row number since I don't really understand what the ID column is. That wasn't specified. And now you can see, so this data has been dummified a little bit. So you're not able to very clearly look at the lines because they're very close together. So let's put in a dark line. And just to make it clear, I'm going to create a detailed visualization of a table. Place them side by side. And now you can see that, let's say if I select this point, wherever I don't have a second value, I don't have a line. But for example, over here, I have a second value, so I have a line. So let's make it a little clearer by inserting a y-axis zoom slider and zooming into those points. And now you start to see your line connections, they begin to show up. So that's how you would do a simple line connection in Spotfire. If you're using older versions of Spotfire, this functionality varies a little bit, but the crux is eventually the same, that you set up your graph view with your x-axis and your y-axis, and then you define your line connection as the parameter based on which you want a unique line. Let me quickly check if there are any questions on chat. All right, so the next question that I have is about the user who's created a data function and they've used a library to create a model, and now they want to score the model. And they're unsure how to do it within Spotfire. So I have an example over here, which I've downloaded from my Exchange. So if you go to community.tipco.com/exchange, you can see that we put up a number of templates and data functions and just cool things that we want to share with the community, and we bridge the gap between the open source and the enterprise a little bit. And you can download any one of these if you have Spotfire. If you don't have Spotfire, you can download a Spotfire trial and download any one of these, and it works as expected. So I've picked up my random forest template. I've used the data that I have within this template, and it lets me look at the data that I have. It lets me assign the variable response roles, which one's a response, which one's an explanatory. If I want to skip some of them, what are the encodings of any of them? So these are all functionality that is built into the UI of the template. So you don't have to use it from scratch. If you want to reuse this template, all you have to do is go in and replace the user table with your own data table. So select your own table and just replace this, and you'll be able to use the template. Then I build out the random forest, and I'm writing it out in this directory. So I actually save it as an R object. What that lets me do is that I have separated the steps of building the model versus scoring the model. So in the question, the user is building the model, but he's running a predict on it within the same data function. That's going to be useful for while you're building the model and you want to look at the performance on the test data, you want to look at the performance of on just the data that you're looking at, historical data. But if you want to do it for future data, then there's a few different ways. So the first step remains the same. So you create the model using Spotfire. For the second, if you want to do a batch score, you save it to disk or you save it to a common network location. For example, if you've got a VPN set up within your company and a lot of different users are creating models and collaborating and sharing that work, so you can save it on a common network location. And then that is this DXP. Now, I wanted to bring up this particular DXP and show you just the data function part of it. Before I proceed, huge shout out to Venkat and Divya Kapoor, who worked on this particular question and helped me create the solution for it. So in this script, this is absolutely nothing, but I'm just loading the models that I have saved from my model location, which I've set up using a document property. And then I'm running the predict on that. So now I can predict on new data, but remember that I'm still doing somewhat of a batch predict. And the output of that predict can go within the various data tables of your Spotfire DXP. The second way of doing ad hoc scoring is that you put it up, wrap it with an API. So you can put it up on the TIBCO Cloud platform TCI, or you can put it up on external services like Algorithmia. And you load up your model and it will build an API around it that you can then call in an ad hoc manner and be able to use that. The final and recommended way is actually deploying it and predicting it using event streams. So let's say you've got, a website and you're predicting consumer behavior real time. So you'll have these event streams come in. They can come in using typical products like Streambase. They can come in as Kafka event streams. So in that case, what we recommend is instead of writing out the raw model, because that's going to be version dependent, library, platform dependent, your operating system dependent, as far as the encodings are considered, we'd rather recommend that you write it out using a platform independent interface like PMML, POJOs, PSAs. You're able to create a lot of these using R, but if you're using something like Streambase, that also lets you pick up your R objects and create, like if you're using data science tools from the TIBCO family, like Statistica and Spotfire Data Science, they let you create some of these model encodings so that it becomes platform independent. And then using this representation, you score it in event engines like Streambase and then make a decision on it using BusinessWorks and so on. That would be the entire life cycle. I'm going to keep this on so that this is still within the recording, but I will not have time to cover this question. So I'm going to cover this question in the next Dr. Spotfire